I've always considered myself pretty resistant to anything that might be scary. My 5 years in the police force taught me that the horrors of the real world are often greater than any imagined. But what happened that night was beyond my imagination. I was on night patrol in one of the remote areas of the city. The night was quiet and peaceful until I received a call over the radio. It has been known that there have been several suspicious disappearances in the area, but we have yet to find anything serious. Scott, we have a new challenge for you. There is a report of suspicious activity at the old warehouse at 42 Middle Street. Head over there and see what's going on, said a voice on the radio. After I arrived at the place, I immediately had the feeling that something was wrong. The old warehouse looked neglected and almost falling apart. Lantern light filtered through the broken windows, casting strange shadows on the walls. I decided to go inside, and inside it was even worse. It smelled of rotten things, and old boxes and pieces of cardboard were scattered on the floor. My sanity was whispering to me to turn back, but I was determined to find out what was going on here. Taking the lantern out into the darkness, I noticed something strange on the wall. Drawings that were clearly made by someone a long time ago. Various symbols and graffiti that did not make any sense. And suddenly I noticed something even more terrible. There was blood on one of the boxes. At the same moment, I heard a rustling behind me. An eerie silence enveloped me, and I tried to concentrate, not knowing what to expect next. My heart was beating faster, and I could feel the blood running cold in my veins. I stopped, listening to the sounds coming from the darkness. My finger trembled slightly on the trigger of the gun, and I tried to calm myself. Each step sounded louder in this dead silence. I turned to try to find the source of the noise, but all I could see was darkness. After walking a few meters forward, I came across what looked like the remains of some old equipment, scattered tools that didn't seem to have ever been used. I felt that something was wrong here. The main thing was that it was as if someone deliberately left these objects in a prominent place to confuse us. Suddenly, I heard a sound echoing in my head, a small voice whispering a name. My name. Scott. Scott. I turned around again, but saw no one. The feeling of anxiety grew even stronger when I noticed an old calendar hanging on the wall. His numbers were marked in red, not for nothing, but in a way that made it look like they were markings for something. I moved closer, trying to figure out what it could mean. On each of the marked days, there were small pieces of black matter. As soon as I touched one of them, I realized that it was something more like blood. I was filled with fear, but I tried not to panic. Further, in the depths of the warehouse, I noticed something bright, a diffused light from a lantern that made its way through the broken windows. This light was moving as if someone was trying to get away from me. I decided to go in that direction because I instinctively felt that there might be an answer to what was happening. As I approached the light, it suddenly disappeared. I was left alone with the deep darkness, and every sound now seemed frightening. My tension was at its peak, and I could feel the air around me getting heavy. Suddenly, I noticed something dark moving on the floor. Strange tracks that led to one of the corners of the warehouse. I followed them determinedly, knowing that something or someone was hiding here, and I had to find out. I followed the tracks that led to the corner of the warehouse, each step dull and heavy. The darkness around became even deeper, and it seemed that the air was becoming thicker. The light of my lantern scattered in the darkness, casting blurred shadows that seemed alive. When I finally reached the corner, I saw an old wooden cabinet standing in the corner. The tracks led to her. I could feel my hands shaking as I carefully opened the closet door. Inside, there were a few old bedspreads hanging on the shelves, but nothing special. However, at the bottom of the closet, I noticed something interesting. A small safe, hidden from view. It had a rusted keyhole. I felt it was important and decided to try to open it. My anxious breath of the sale was felt in the silence. After trying to unlock the safe, I came across a few tools that were nearby. A small screwdriver and some fine tools. I tried to open the safe, but it wouldn't budge. With each attempt, I felt the fear grow and the sense of danger grow. Suddenly, I heard a sound that was like a whisper. I immediately turned around and noticed that there was a note on the floor. It was written in illegible handwriting, but I could make out a few words. Do not open. My hands became cold. I knew it wasn't just a joke. I went back to the safe again, trying to get the keys out of my pocket, when I suddenly noticed that the warehouse door began to swing. My attention was distracted. Someone was here. I began to look for cover, preparing for a possible collision. I decided to check the note again. Unfolding it, I found additional words written in small print. "You are too late. Open and learn the truth." My heart was racing, and I felt it was time to find out what was really hidden in the safe. After trying to open the safe again, I finally heard the mechanism click. The door of the safe opened with a heavy metallic sound. Inside were several folders and black and white photographs. I took one of them and unfolded it. The photo showed a man I knew well. He was a detective who had disappeared a few months ago. But what was even more frightening was that he was pictured with a person I did not recognize, in circumstances that clearly indicated something disturbing. The folders contained documents talking about secret operations and unknown persons. My anxiety increased. Something was clearly wrong here, and I felt that I was in danger. I took the documents and photos and tried to analyze them against the background of disturbing thoughts. The documents contained investigative reports that were never released. They talked about secret operations that were being carried out undercover and about people who seemed to have disappeared without a trace. I was very alarmed by this because there were no reports of successful operations in the folders, only failures and secrets. At one point, I stopped when I heard a noise behind me. My ears immediately began to search for the source of the sound, and I realized that someone was approaching. I hid the documents under the blanket and quietly, cautiously left the warehouse to see who it could be. The light from the lantern revealed the dark marks on the floor again, but this time they disappeared in the direction of the old refrigerator. I moved closer, trying to feel if there were any other signs of presence. Lantern beams penetrated the darkness, dispersing it and creating terrible shadows. Suddenly, I heard voices coming from the far corner of the warehouse. They sounded like several people talking. My fear grew. I was alone, and I couldn't tell if this was a real threat or if my imagination was playing evil tricks on me. I went back to the safe and pulled other documents out of the folders. In one of them, I came across identifying marks and code words that seemed to be part of a larger plan. It seemed to me that these documents could help solve the mystery, but I also understood that they could be the cause of my troubles. The noise of voices grew louder. I decided to act. Approaching the source of the sound, I found a door leading to the basement. They were partially open and a strange stream of light was coming from there. My instinct told me to check this place out. I carefully made my way down the stairs to the basement, feeling my heart pounding with fear. The basement was filled with old furniture and boxes, but I noticed that in one part of the basement there was a partially exposed wall, behind which something dark and indeterminate could be seen. The light of the lantern illuminated the darkness again, and I saw that it was a passage to another room. I went inside and found more photos and documents taped to the walls. These were detailed plans and drawings that indicated underground tunnels and unremarkable places. One of the drawings showed how the pipes and cables leading to a specific place were passing. Suddenly, I felt someone watching me. I turned, and in the darkness I saw silhouettes quickly disappearing around the corner. My panic reached its peak. I couldn't tell if it was my imagination or a real threat. My task was clear. I needed to find answers and find out what was going on. But now it was clear to me that I was walking into something that might turn out to be far more dangerous than I had imagined. I could feel panic starting to take control of me, but I mustered all my resolve and continued to survey the basement. The noise of voices, which died down again, suggested that perhaps my observation had not gone unnoticed. I had to be careful not to get into trouble. I approached one of the documents on the wall that piqued my special interest. It was a plan that clearly showed the underground tunnels leading to the old industrial areas of the city. Many of them were marked as banned or inactive. It became clear to me that these tunnels could be part of a conspiracy or illegal operations. However, before I could continue my investigations, I heard a vague sound, like heavy breathing or the rustling of someone's clothes. My heart beat faster again, and I hid behind the large box, trying not to make a sound. After a few minutes, I saw two figures moving past where I was. They spoke in whispers and did not notice me. I understood that these people could be part of the network I was learning about. Here I decided it would be best to wait until they left the basement and then try to find out more. I remained in cover until the figures disappeared. After that, I carefully stepped out of the box and continued my investigation. I came across another part of the basement that looked like a small storage room. There were several large containers that looked like they hadn't been used in years. I decided to check them out. Opening one of the containers, I found inside a huge number of items that seemed to belong to different people. Personal belongings, documents, cameras, and other items that could belong to those who had disappeared. I noticed one camera lying on top of the pile. I picked it up and decided to see if there was anything important on it. The camera turned on, and the images taken in the underground tunnels appeared on the screen. Some of them depicted people I recognized as missing persons. I also saw pictures showing some unknown masked people who appeared to be performing some kind of surgery. My nerves were on edge. I tried to find any evidence or details that could support my guesses, and suddenly I came across documents containing lists of people to whom, apparently, something dangerous was done. At that moment, I heard an alarming noise from the side of the stairs. Someone was approaching again. I realized that I should find a way out as soon as possible to avoid confrontation. I tried to collect all the important evidence and quickly left the room, grabbing my camera and some documents. As I climbed the stairs, I could feel my fear peaking. I decided to leave the warehouse and contact my colleagues to report my findings. But suddenly I felt again that someone was following me. I turned and saw silhouettes against the background of the lantern approaching the entrance. My heart beat even faster. I heard the rustling again, and my heart raced again. The silhouettes I noticed were already quite close. I realized that leaving the basement and going simply was not worth it. I had to find a faster way to escape. I quickly looked around and saw a narrow passage leading to the ventilation shaft. My only hope is to go through the vent and find another way out. I knew it could be dangerous, but there was no other choice. I tried to move as quietly as possible, holding back loud breaths along the way. The ventilation shaft was narrow, and I, curled up in a ball, tried to move forward. The sound of voices and footsteps behind could still be heard. I hoped they wouldn't be able to follow me through this passage. The mine was dark and filled with dust, which made breathing difficult. I moved slowly, trying not to make any unnecessary movements so as not to attract attention. After a few minutes, I finally saw the light at the other end of the mine. I came out of the vent in a small room that looked like a technical warehouse. I carefully examined the room and noticed that there was a window in one of the corners, which I was able to open. My hope of escape revived. Having got out of the room through the window, I found myself in the backyard of the warehouse. It was quiet here, but I couldn't relax. I ran to the nearest parking spot where my car was parked. My thoughts that I might be persecuted haunted me. After getting behind the wheel, I instantly started the engine and headed towards the exit of the warehouse area. I kept my distance from the main roads, trying to avoid any chance of being seen. My head raced with thoughts of what I had found. Documents and photographs were critically important to me. They could be the key to uncovering a great conspiracy. I contacted my colleagues via radio, but the transmitter only emitted static noise. My anxiety increased because I understood that it is possible that someone is monitoring the radio communication and can track me. In the end, I decided to find a safe place to view all the evidence. I arrived at an old hotel that didn't seem to have been used for a long time. Here, I could calmly review the documents and photographs found. Opening the folders, I found more details about the missing persons, about the plans and true goals of this secret organization. It seems that high-ranking officials and the police were involved in the case. My suspicions were confirmed. There were names of people I knew, and many of them were connected to numerous suspicious cases. But it was here that I noticed one particular photograph, a picture of people wearing masks, and one of them was a person I recognized. It was a detective I knew myself who disappeared a few months ago. His image in the photo with the other people indicated that he was involved in all of this, or at least knew more than I could imagine. My anxiety peaked. I understood that my investigation had become more dangerous than I thought, and that every next step could be my last. The question kept spinning in his head. Who can be trusted, and how to reveal this secret without falling into a trap. I laid out the documents in front of me, trying to find at least some thread that could connect all the pieces of the puzzle. The photo of the missing detective, along with other individuals who appeared to be involved in something criminal, became a key element in my investigation. I drew attention to one of the documents, which contained a list of names and addresses. Many of these addresses were associated with individuals and businesses that seemed to have little in common. However, one of them stood out, an address on the outskirts of the city, which was marked as inactive in the documents. I decided I should check this address. After reviewing the documents, I carefully packed all the materials back into the bag and headed to the car. Fortunately, I saw no signs of pursuit, but I couldn't relax. I knew danger could be lurking at every turn. The road to the address was long and foggy. At night, everything looked even more terrifying, and even the greatest fears seemed more real. When I finally arrived at the site, I saw an old industrial complex surrounded by a high fence and looking almost as if it had been abandoned for a long time. The complex was illuminated only by the moonlight that broke through the clouds. I cautiously entered through the gate, which was surprisingly broken. It gave the impression that the place had not been closed for a long time. Inside, it was dark and cold, with a noticeable smell of old rust and rot. I turned on the flashlight and began to survey the area. Among the junk and old cars, I found several rooms that looked like office space. One of the rooms was partially opened, and I looked inside. There were documents on the table and several computers that were still on. I approached the table and saw that a video was on the screen of one of the computers. I hit play and saw something that just blew my mind. The video showed people similar to those in the photos and their interactions with unknown individuals. These were records of meetings and planning operations that indicated the broad scale of the conspiracy. Many of them related to illegal operations and manipulation involving missing persons. My mind was literally boiling with the realization that I had stumbled upon something much more than a random investigation. My attempts to understand how it all connected led me to try to find out if there were any other key details. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. I turned to see two men in dark suits enter the room. Their faces were covered by masks. They noticed me and quickly began to approach. I understood that staying here meant falling into a trap. My only option is to escape. I grabbed the papers and quickly left the room, trying to leave as few traces as possible. Running through the maze of old warehouses, I heard my pursuers approach. They were well prepared and fast. After leaving the building, I quickly got into my car and drove away, trying to avoid any tracking system. My goal was now clear: to find a safe place to look at all the data I received and try to understand how it all connected. But with each passing minute, I felt that the danger was growing and that I was becoming part of a much bigger game than just investigating missing persons. I continued driving down the empty roads, trying to calm myself down and collect my thoughts. The danger from pursuers has not disappeared, but now my main goal is to understand the data I received. I decided to return to the hotel where the documents and the camera were already found. It was the only place I could try to decipher the information. When I got back to the hotel, I felt that my nerves were stretched like a string. My movements were quick and deliberate. I could not afford to make a mistake. I unfolded the documents and photos on the table. Particular attention was drawn to data on companies and private individuals mentioned in the documents. Addresses, names, and telephone numbers again became the focus of my investigations. In one of the documents, I found a reference to a certain security company. Their contact details were listed as trusted partners. I decided to check out this company. I found her contact information on the internet and called her. A small company specializing in VIP protection and security management. I felt that this firm could be the key to solving the whole case. After a few calls, I was able to find out that one of their senior employees, Richard Clinton, was fired a few months ago for violating the privacy policy. It was the same period when the detective disappeared. My intuition suggested that Clinton might know more than others. I went to the address I found in the documents to find Clinton. The place looked neglected and showed signs of decay. I braced myself for possible dangers and headed inside again. Inside, I came upon a table and several boxes filled with old papers. I started to look through them when I heard a sound on the stairs, footsteps quickly approaching. I quickly hid behind the box and heard the voices again. Several people entered the room and I could hear them discussing my investigations. This confirmed my suspicions that my stalkers are not just following me, they are also aware of my recent actions. I began to think of a plan of action. It turns out that these people have access to a lot of resources and probably the information I was trying to uncover. My time became even more limited, and I had to find a way to gather the last bits of information that could shed light on this whole conspiracy. Now that the danger was even more obvious, I turned to the documents again and found a map on which several places were marked. One of them appeared to be another guard point covering other important locations. I decided to visit this place. All other options were exhausted, and I had to find ways to outrun my pursuers. In order to avoid attention, I went to the place that was marked on the map as secured. When I arrived, I saw that it was a small office complex surrounded by a high fence. I decided to check out the place, trying to find any documents or evidence to support my suspicions. I used the technique again to get inside quietly, trying to avoid any confrontation with the security. My mission became even more difficult, and I realized that this investigation could have more consequences than I thought. With each step, I felt that I was getting closer to solving the great mystery, but the danger was becoming more and more real. I moved slowly and cautiously inside the office complex. The interior lights were dimmed and the corridors were empty. I was hoping I could find important documents or other evidence without meeting security. Before continuing, I tried to contact my colleagues by phone, but the connection was lost again. I felt that my actions were being watched and that someone was deliberately blocking my attempts to communicate. I came across an office that looked like a central administrative point. Inside, there were several computers and racks of papers. I decided to check the computers, hoping to find some important information. While checking the files on the computers, I came across some password-protected documents. I used my cybersecurity knowledge to try to crack the passwords, but it took longer than I expected. While I was working, I could hear the sounds of people approaching, and my patience was at an end. When I finally managed to access the files, I found extensive information about the organization that all these secrets seemed to belong to. The documents showed a huge network with many participants, and their plans looked very complex. In one of the files, I found an extensive list of addresses and names of people who could be important to the investigation. I came across several markers that pointed to places where special operations were being conducted. These were coordinates on a map that led to several restricted areas. Suddenly, I heard footsteps and voices again. I collected my documents and decided to leave the office, knowing that it would be dangerous to stay here for a long time. I ran out of the office complex and, trying to avoid any attention, headed for my car. As I drove, I felt that it was probable that my pursuers might be on my trail again. Fortunately, the road was empty and I was able to avoid a possible interception. I decided to try to contact some people who might be able to help me, but, as always, the connection was lost. I arrived at the old library, where I planned to try to analyze the found documents in a calm environment. This place was quite remote and seemed safe. I started going through the documents again when suddenly I noticed that one of the photos was a picture of the same detective I had seen earlier. But now he was with other people who appeared to be from the same organization. I realized that I needed to learn more about these places marked on the map and that this data could help me in my investigation. I decided to check out one of these places. I arrived at one of the marked addresses, an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was a derelict place, but it looked like it might still hold something. I went inside and found several doors leading to underground rooms. My nerves were on edge again, but I knew that these underground tunnels could be the key to solving everything. As I made my way down the stairs, I came across some old boxes and containers. I began to look through them and found several important documents and notes that confirmed my suspicions of a conspiracy. My investigation began to look like part of a much larger plan involving many people and places. I found records of meetings and meetings held in these tunnels and details of the illegal operations that took place undercover. While I was working on deciphering the data I received, I noticed that I was being followed. The sound of a car driving by made me wary. I decided to leave the underground warehouse and head to a safe location to review the data in a more relaxed environment. I went back to the hotel and started checking the documents again. I found details that indicated that the organization I stumbled upon was deeply integrated into government structures. Many of them were connected to high-ranking officials and the police. One of the documents was a list containing specific dates and places for the following operations. I decided that I needed to act quickly to stop these plans and reveal the whole truth. As I prepared for the next mission, I could feel the danger approaching. I tried to contact my colleagues again, but again failed. My sense of security was violated again. I went to the place that was listed in the documents as the central control point. This was another room that looked like an important part of this plot. I prepared myself for a possible encounter with security or other dangers. Arriving at the place, I saw that the premises were well guarded. I decided to bypass security and find a way to get inside to find any important data. I used all my skills and experience to get inside. Again, I came across several important documents and computers that contained even more information about this conspiracy. I found coordinates and plans for the final stage of the operations that were planned. It was a critical moment, and I knew I had to act quickly to stop these plans. With the latest data, I returned to the hotel, hoping to uncover the final details. But my fears were confirmed when I learned that the hotel was under surveillance. I decided that it was necessary to act urgently. I collected all the documents and found a way to contact law enforcement to report the situation. When the law enforcement officers arrived, I gave them all the data and documents proving the existence of the conspiracy. It turned out that my information became key to the investigation. My work wasn't done, but I felt like I could finally rest knowing that the important details were known. However, I understood that this was only the beginning of a big thing, and the dangers were not over yet. I was leaving the hotel when I felt again that something was wrong. I saw how new cars appeared and realized that I might be pursued. My fears were confirmed when several people in masks and dark suits started approaching my car. Quickly changing my plans, I headed for a remote part of the city where it looked like I would be able to escape pursuit. I needed to find a way to transfer all the data and documents to a safe place. I found an old warehouse that was being used as a temporary shelter for investigations. My colleagues were already in touch and helped organize a place to store and check the received data. My colleagues started checking documents and computers. It turned out that everything was even worse than I thought. The conspiracy involved not only the police, but also business structures engaged in illegal operations throughout the city and beyond. I learned that a series of large actions were planned, including robberies and preparations for large-scale terrorist acts. My colleagues worked to gather enough evidence to thwart these plans and launch a large-scale operation. During the night, we received information that one of the key figures in the conspiracy planning the final stages of the operation was to meet to discuss plans at a remote location. My colleagues organized a raid to arrest everyone who was involved in the conspiracy. I joined the operation knowing that it would be dangerous. We went to the specified location using all the necessary equipment and protection to avoid any unforeseen situations. The operation was successful, but not without difficulties. We arrested several key figures who were responsible for organizing the conspiracy. During the searches, we found even more documents that confirmed the connections between the conspirators and high-ranking officials. However, even after the successful apprehension, I felt that something remained unresolved. We learned that some important individuals are still on the loose and that stopping them may be more difficult than we thought. Over time, it was discovered that the conspiracy did not end with the arrest of several figures. Our team continued to investigate and revealed that the conspiracy was just part of a larger operation involving front persons and false documents to divert attention from the real plans. The investigation led to a number of arrests and investigations in various government agencies. All connections were revealed, and the criminals were brought to justice. My efforts helped reveal the truth and stop further criminal plans. After the surgery was over, I felt a great sense of relief, but also realized that my work was only part of the bigger picture. Dangers would always be present, but now I knew that even in the darkest times, a path to truth and justice could be found. Completing this investigation has given me a new perspective on the importance of continuing to fight for justice and honesty. I felt that this struggle was not over yet, and that each new day brought new challenges and opportunities. As the thought that the investigation was over began to sink in, I felt that there were new mysteries that needed solving. It appeared that while the main plot had been uncovered, there were still small elements that could not be fully uncovered. In particular, one of the key figures who was arrested appeared to have significant influence over the dark side of the business, which has yet to be fully investigated. It was a figure named William Dow, who turned out to be not just an ordinary member of the conspiracy, but a really influential player. My goal now was to understand how William Doe managed to maintain his influence, and who else in the high-ranking government or businessmen might have been involved in this scheme. I decided to investigate further. Before continuing, I received alarming messages from several anonymous sources warning of a possible new threat. It seems that even after the conspiracy is revealed, there are still many unknown factors that need to be investigated. I turned again to documents and notes to discover possible connections that had gone unnoticed. This led me to new leads pointing to expanded operations that could be prepared in other cities or even countries. My colleagues and I have been working to track new information channels to find any additional evidence or signals indicating further threats. We have created a network of whistleblowers to receive information from various sources and warn of possible attacks or dangers. It turned out that William Doe was part of an even larger international cartel that aimed to carry out large-scale financial and political manipulation. I realized that my role in the investigation was now even more important than before. I entered the dangerous game again, but now I had more resources and support. Together with our colleagues, we continued to work to uncover the last elements of the conspiracy and ensure that new threats are stopped before they can cause harm. This new phase of the investigation opened new horizons for me and gave me new opportunities to fight against injustice. I knew that my fight was not over, and that I must continue to watch every step to ensure safety and truth in this complex world.